Hello everybody. Hi to everyone who joined us today or tonight, I should say. Last but certainly not least for today, we have with us Rachel Russell, who is our final guest speaker for this edition of Eventex B2B Match 2024. Today, Rachel will speak about different ways in which you can optimize your events in order to attract C-suite executives. So, Rachel, hi, I'm so happy you are with us tonight. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you for being one of our guest speakers.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. So as those of you are joining, I'm going to make a guess that most of you are meeting or event professionals like me. So you've seen your fair share of events. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Looking back on my career, I've had a fire alarm go off in the middle of a meeting. I've had a vendor inform me that they double booked the space and they wouldn't be able to accommodate us about a week before the event. And I've had so few people register that I've had to cancel an event. And I'm sure some of you have had similar bad experiences because you can never predict everything that's going to happen on site. But thankfully, those bad experiences are pretty rare nowadays. I've learned a lot and have since held incredibly successful events. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So just a little bit of background. I was a senior event planner at Deloitte for about 7 years. I worked at a few startups, and then I found my current role, which is an assistant director of field marketing at EY. And in all of my roles, I've focused specifically on planning and delivering elevated events for C-suite executives. I currently run the Entrepreneur of the Year Greater Los Angeles Awards. So I am coming from Los Angeles, California in the United States. And I plan events and award ceremonies for the CEOs that come through our program. So I want to talk about the audience of C-suite executives and what makes a C-suite executive different from the average attendee. So they are some of the busiest people in the world. I think back to an event I attended last month when I realized there were two other very cool experiences on the same date and the same time. And I was disappointed I couldn't be at all of them. But that is just a typical day for a CEO. So I feel like when I chat with some of the different CEOs that are in our program, they could either attend a business meeting, they could fly to a conference in Las Vegas, or they could spend time with their family, which is always important as well. So they have a lot of competing priorities for their time and attention, and they have to be selective. So because of these demanding priorities, you have to think through what is worth their time. So in order to attract them for your events, ideally you offer a very cool experience. So I've had some different CFO forums where we thought through, in Orange County, California, the United States, at Disneyland, there is this 21 Royal, which is a members only club that very few people get to go to. And we thought that would be a cool experience for that forum. And we also looked into a Porsche experience where they get to drive around the track. So something that these CFOs wouldn't normally get the opportunity to do. Obviously, that depends on budget. So that is not always the case. So we'll talk through, if you're working with a smaller budget as well, kind of how to really make that stand out for C-suite executives. And I find that telling the C-suite executives ahead of time in the invitation can be really helpful. So letting them know in that invite what event elements you're going to have. So you should tell them why this isn't just a standard meeting or standard reception, and give them something to look forward to. So when something urgent pops up at work or traffic is an hour longer than they're expecting, they still decide to come to your event and they don't turn back and go home. So if you aren't sure where to start, just know that as I continue in this presentation, I'm going to give you several examples of event enhancements. But speaking through the audience, tailoring your event to this audience, it doesn't just have to be a cool experience or a unique venue. You can also focus on the meeting content. So you'll want the meeting content to be very relevant and helpful for the CEOs. The food should be top notch. And I always have an open bar rather than just wine and beer. And so obviously the open bar requires budget again. So thinking through what else you could minimize. I know that at my networking events, the CEOs are so into the networking, they actually don't eat a ton. And so we've been able to kind of pare down the number of attendees that we say are going to be having food. And that's kind of how we compensate for that. And people are happy that it's that elevated experience. And even more important than that, we ensure that they're networking with their true peers. So think through, if you were CEO, you want your peers to be in the room. You don't want crazy big differences in terms of job title. So we had a Women in the Boardroom event a few months ago, and we invited women across a variety of industries and experiences, but everyone was a senior level executive. And everyone's feedback was they remarked on how wonderful the conversations were. So people didn't even want to stop the breakout discussions that we had when we were ready to pivot and have the reception and the food. They're like, yeah, 1 minute, like I'm having such a great conversation here. And that was something we heard over and over where they said that was the best event they had ever attended because they really felt like they were surrounded by their peers. So thinking through headcount. So some people have told me that no-show rates have gone up to as much as 50% post-pandemic. I think a lot of people after the pandemic, they want to also take that time at home and spend time with family, which is important. We've seen more for our events, about 30% no-show rate at events. And obviously you don't want to have so many last minute cancellations or no-shows that the room looks empty or a CEO or CFO doesn't have as great conversations with their peers because certain people didn't show up. So something that I've found really effective is I will send the attendee list ahead of time in my reminder email. And obviously it doesn't have contact information or emails in it, but I will put the name, their job title, the company, so that way they can see who they know that's coming to this event and they can maybe coordinate to show up together or focus on someone that they really think would be a good business connection and get them excited to attend. And then something that I've started doing recently is if you work at a company and you're planning it internally compared to an agency, you can assign someone internal to each of your C-suite attendees. And hopefully that's someone that knows the executive, they can build a relationship with them over time. So in our Entrepreneur of the Year program, we have 4 main events, and the host is usually there at each of those events. So they welcome them, and hopefully you can turn it into a business development opportunity later down the road. And alternatively, if you work at an event agency and you're planning something for a client, you can suggest to the client, like, here, take a look at your attendee list, the people that are the most important to you. Do you have someone that can really own that relationship? Because that's also something that will really lead to business opportunities. And I wanted to point out that invitations are often overlooked with C-suite executives because they're getting even more emails and pings and phone calls than we are dealing with. And I think we deal with a lot. So what I typically recommend is sending a second invitation after that first one has gone out, maybe a week, and really customize that. So it can have their name, maybe a couple of sentences. So something that they recently posted on LinkedIn or something that you discussed the last time that you saw them if you already have a relationship with them. And that's a situation where if you have that internal host or relationship owner assigned, they can even send a follow-up from that invitation. And hopefully they know who the person is. They might recognize their name and actually open that email. And we found that we get a lot of emails back this way saying either they can't make it, but they're really excited for a future event, or we see a huge surge in registration rather than just no response at all. So it does help to have, a few sentences, just really customizing it to them. I feel like customization and personalization, it's not just a strategy for C-suite executives, it's a necessity. And then if your budget allows, direct mail and gifting is obviously a very helpful tool to get people to show up. So I had a past event that was called The Power of Women at Deloitte and Facebook. And so we shipped a box of gifts to every attendee prior to the event, and everyone actually showed up. And inside the gifts, it was essentially things that were relevant to a meeting. So we had a foam roller that they would then use for the workout session during the meeting. We had a book by one of our speakers, and then we also sent an Uber Eats credit for lunch since it was a virtual meeting. And I've also seen recently a vendor reached out to me, I believe it was Reach Desk, and they sent me a bottle of whiskey. And I was like, oh, that's nice. It's the online thing where you can choose what gift you want. It gets sent to you in the mail. But what I was really surprised by is when I opened it and it had my name and my company logo engraved in it. And I was very impressed by that because I thought that was an elevated experience. And I think if I was a CEO, that would impress me more than just a basic gift that I got to choose. Having either your name or your company logo really impresses people. And so that's what I want to talk about next is personalization. So why I loved that gift was because it was personalized, and everyone loves to feel special. So personalizing either gifts or event elements with an attendee's name makes that experience stand out for them. So it takes your event to the next level. And when attendees experience that, they're excited to come back for more events in the future. So these are some photos from our Entrepreneur of the Year Gala. We decided to customize all of our table centerpieces with the company that was sitting at that table. And then for any miscellaneous tables, we had the Entrepreneur of the Year logo rather than the table company. And we also did have certain situations where there would be two companies sitting at a table. And so we were able to put a logo on each side of the centerpiece. And so these glow-in-the-dark centerpieces doubled as decor, and they really added to the atmosphere of the ballroom because we wanted to contribute to that feeling of excitement as CEOs and their friends and family were arriving. And I've seen a lot of events that just have a basic stand with a table number or a name. And we felt that was boring and wanted to have some centerpieces with a wow-worthy effect. And people took these home as a gift, which was not expected. We thought we would maybe get to reuse them in future events. That was not the case. But I've seen it since, like at CEO's headquarters or in the background of virtual calls. And I think that's a really unique thing because they're going to have that and always remember where they got it from. And then since I am based in Los Angeles, obviously Hollywood and the Walk of Fame is very relevant. So we attended a event that was run by United Way for their centennial anniversary, and it was at the Paramount Pictures studio lot. And these were some Walk of Fame stars that were very unique and stood out to me because they were customized with the event logo, but also the company name. And every star was a company that was in attendance. And it generated a lot of social media and photos. And that's additional PR and buzz that will only benefit your event. So a lot of the attendees were walking along the stars as they went into the event. And we are considering this for our Entrepreneur of the Year gala. We've seen that where people will pick up the star, which we weren't expecting, and they'll take photos with it at step and repeat, and then even bring home with them. So that's another personalized decor that really is a memorable experience. I remember a few years back when I went to Biz Bash, they had an edible photo booth, and I took my photo, and it was printed on this iced coffee that you'll see on the right-hand side. And they had a huge crowd and lots of social media photos. So I thought that was a really great example that you can do on so many food and drink options. There are ways to incorporate that, whether you're having a day-long meeting or conference and you want to have it as a snack break, or during a dinner or cocktail reception. There's also the opportunity where you can take photos upon arrival, and then as they're leaving, package up some macaroons or cookies and give it as a surprise gift. And I've had conferences before where I've hired a latte artist. So in Southern California, there's someone named Barista Art, and he travels across the United States, but I'm sure there's others in other countries. But he really is an artist. So rather than having it printed on the coffee, he will truly sit there and draw. So we had him draw the theme of one of our conferences. He drew the company logo, the location, and attendees really enjoyed watching the artist at work. It does take longer than a photo that gets printed, but it really serves as an entertainment piece. And then when you're thinking through thank you gifts, whether that's for your very special guests, those VVIP attendees, but also maybe speakers or judges. A lot of times we ask, what can you get someone who has everything? I've had events where we give wine for speakers, and it's nice, but it's not super memorable. So at Deloitte, we did a very fancy pen that was engraved with the event name and then the attendee's name, which I liked. But over the years, I've started trying to think what else could we do? And so for EY, we do engraved photo frames with the Entrepreneur of the Year logo and the year. And we put a photo of the judge at their different events as a thank you gift. And that's been really popular. But one of the more fun ones, if your C-suite executives have a good personality, we have found that bobbleheads are really popular because you can have the name of the conference and put that they were a speaker on the bottom. And we usually work with a designer. So we get feedback, send several photos of the person. So that way it looks very realistic and actually like the CEO. And people have this as decoration in their office and as background in virtual calls. So it's a more unique one, similar to those centerpieces I showed, where it sticks with the attendee and they keep it in their home. And just as important as this personalization and customization is event enhancements. So what activities or elements do you have that are going to make this more than just a normal dinner, reception, or meeting? A good example is I recently attended Site Southern California, and they delivered a very memorable event. So they had a combination of a beautiful venue. So it was held at the resort at Pelican Hill, which has all views of the ocean and golf courses. And then they also had meeting content that was very relevant to the audience. But on top of that, they enhanced their event with 2 activities. So you could make your own perfume or cologne scent, and then you could also pick out a succulent and decorate the planter. So when I arrived, I didn't immediately go to the activities because I was enjoying the view, the drinks, the networking. But when enough time goes by and you're antsy for something else, studies do show like our attention spans have diminished significantly. So that's that's when that activity gives you the extra engagement. So I had an event for Deloitte that was about GDPR rules, which is not the most exciting topic. It was for media and entertainment companies. And so we held it at the W Hotel in Hollywood. We were trying to think, how do we make this maybe less exciting topic more interesting and engaging? So we had a sketch artist come in and they summarized the meeting content. And so this was entertainment to watch during the meeting. And we also had it on display during the cocktail reception after our meeting. And we also included it as a PDF in the follow-up communication. And that was something very unique that we did in the Sorry We Missed You email as well. Kind of piqued their interest and showed them what we did at the event. And a lot of people replied saying like, oh, I'm bummed I missed this. Hopefully I can, come to a future event. And I've also seen boards where you can actually have the attendees interact rather than just watch a meeting artist. And so if attendees can either draw or add to a board, that can work really well. And this is one other example. So the event that I mentioned, that was the Power of Women at Facebook and Deloitte, where we sent the box of gifts. We also had a virtual artist. But what was different about this is because it was a virtual event rather than in person, they didn't get to watch the artist at work. So it was a surprise at the very end where we shared it, and the attendees didn't know what to expect. So you can see in the top left corner, we had a basketball player as our speaker. And in the bottom right corner, we had a female beatboxer. So attendees were able to write different sayings in the chat box. And then the artists incorporated that into a song live, which was a very unique experience. So we enjoyed kind of sending this photo afterwards. And then activities are so important as well for attendees. I had an event in Chicago at Italy, and we had a networking dinner and reception following a conference. So after walking around booths all day, people were really ready to relax. And so we had a pasta making station, which you can see on the left, a mozzarella making station, which is the center photo, and bocce ball. And people got very engaged with it. It was similar to the site Southern California event I mentioned, where I didn't go straight to the activities right away. People were definitely more so there for the networking and drinks, but as time goes by, they were very excited to have those activities as well as an option. And one other thing is that I don't have photos of this, but I do want to mention it because engagement really is the secret sauce of events. I previously worked at a startup and we had a reception at the Aria. And during the reception, you could design custom Nike sneakers on iPads. And then the sneakers were shipped to attendees' homes as a gift. So the invitation told them about the activity. And because we told them ahead of time, we had so many people show up. These were C-suite executives who had at least 5 other options to go to that evening. And we were at maximum capacity. It was just something that was an option on the Nike website. So we had it pulled up and people really enjoyed designing that ahead of time, as well as getting it in the mail later. So it gave us additional touch points. And I think having activities that are very relevant to the venue is important. So at Italy, for example, we did more pasta making, bocce ball. I've done dinner in Las Vegas where the gift of an autographed cookbook, or we gave a gift of an autographed cookbook at each seat at the dinner. And so the restaurant was owned by a famous chef. So we didn't tell them ahead of time what the gift was going to be, but we hinted at it in the reminder email. And people really enjoyed that extra enhancement. And this has photos of the Aquarium of the Pacific. And so we had a penguin for a portion of the event, as well as a jellyfish touch tank. We also had a large globe that was hanging in one of the rooms and really leaned into what made Long Beach unique. And so think through what is special for those that are traveling to conferences or live events and it's out of town for them. They can then see part of the city, even if they don't have time to sightsee, just by coming to your event. And I want to also mention food and beverage doesn't have to be boring. So you may not have as much flexibility if your event is at a hotel or you can't bring in certain vendors, but one idea is that we had sprinkles cupcakes as gifts, and so they were packaged and attendee could grab it as they were leaving a reception. So we had about 6 different flavor options and they all had the company logo on it. And then if you have flexibility to bring in vendors, Gastro Garage is one of the fun ones that I've come across, and a crowd really gathers. They put on a show with fire, as you can see with the blowtorches in the photo, and the food tastes amazing. So this is one of those experiences that people film on their phones, the memory stays with them, and they're telling people about it the following day. And that's the feeling you want your C-suite attendees to have, because then when they get the next invitation from you, they're even more likely to say yes, because they know they're in for a treat. And one option I wanted to mention, if you have a lower budget, something as small as wine charms that you can get from Zazzle or Etsy really make a difference. So you can give them to your catering company or hotel or restaurant ahead of time, and they will put it on your wine glasses. Just make sure you let the venue know ahead of time so they have that prep time built in to put them on the glasses before attendees arrive. And that paired with custom napkins that have either your company logo or the event name are really popular. And we typically do a specialty cocktail and a specialty mocktail at every event. So more folks aren't drinking these days. And so people really appreciate when you offer them an option for a mocktail. And it makes it easy when there's just, oh, I'll have the specialty rather than having to come up with a drink request. And then the second photo is the Beverly Hills Hotel, which was where we had our Entrepreneur of the Year gala this past year. And they have a ripple machine, so they can print any photo on a cappuccino. So we obviously did our Entrepreneur of the Year logo. And then we have EY ice cubes, which were relatively inexpensive. And the hotel is known for having coconuts with the hotel brand name on them. So we decided to have a fun play on that where we put our event name on the coconuts. So people were taking photos and had a lot of fun with them. And keep in mind, this was a black tie gala. So it's not something you'd expect people to be holding and sipping in evening gowns, but it worked. And so I want to go back to something that I mentioned when I first started this presentation, and it was that as event planners, we've all seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So my hope is that by incorporating these activities and personalized decor into your events, you'll not just have good events, you'll have amazing experiences that even the toughest people to impress, like C-suite executives, will be coming back for more. And I know we're at time, but do we have time for questions?
Yes, we have time for questions. So if anyone has a question for Rachel and her wonderful presentation, you can use the chat for that. First of all, Rachel, thank you for sharing with us all of these amazing examples and strategies of how to attract these very, very busy CEO people to our events. So I don't know if we have questions already, but maybe while that happens, I do have one in mind. So,
Yeah.
what do you think, in your opinion, is the biggest challenge that event professionals who organize events face when they try to attract these people? Is this the lack of creativity or the inability to think outside of the box? Because you said earlier in your presentation that these are people who have it all, so you have to give them something that they don't have or that it's more difficult to get?
Yeah, I think the greatest challenge is getting them to read your emails first. A lot of CEOs don't even see the invitation
Yeah.
to an event. And so that's why if you have someone who has a relationship with them, or maybe someone who's come to your events in the past is friends with that CEO, and they can say, hey, I'm going to this event. Do you want to come with me?
Yeah.
Just finding ways to get in front of them
To
because
reach to them easier.
exactly.
Yeah. So that's the start of it.
Hmm.
I do have some questions. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for the inspiring presentation. You did not mention sustainability. How about sustainability for C-level events?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think it depends on the CEO in attendance, but for at least our target audience, Entrepreneur of the Year has a lot of CEOs that focus on sustainability and impact. So we definitely are always thinking through ESG, sustainability. We never serve water bottles, we only have like a water station. I think small things like that, like having a digital presentation rather than printed handouts for everyone at a meeting, is really important, especially as folks all across the world realize how important that is.
And maybe if you communicate the sustainable practices in the invitation or before the event, they will be more open to attend such an event.
And it shows that you're making positive strides in the
Yeah,
environment, and why would they not want to support that?
yeah, exactly. So one more comment. Thank you for the inspiring session. Awesome presentation. Does AI have any applications in C-level events specifically?
I think so. I think especially as AI gets more and more prevalent, we have to find ways to incorporate that. Some people argue that, AI is going to replace people's jobs, and no, I think it is going to be the people who embrace AI that are going to be the most successful. So
Yeah.
learning how to incorporate that into your job. So we've done like conference walls that are using um, are like augmented reality, for instance, and granted that's not AI, but finding a way to have that technology front of mind. And AI has been a very hot topic for meeting content for C-suite executives. So giving them tips on how they can really use it in their business impact.
Yeah, and for sure AI can help you with coming up with more creative ideas on what to implement in your events, like experiences or personalized gifts and stuff like that.
And you can even put ideas for those personalized invitations
Yeah.
into chat gbt, or at EY we have our like AI tool, and use that as examples for how can you really customize the invitation. And you may not go exactly word for word what it says, but it might get your wheels spinning in terms of other ideas.
Yes. So would you use some form of gamification for such events, whether it is for enhancing networking or just for extra entertainment?
Yeah, I think gamification can be an awesome tool. I've had conferences where in the different sessions, the speaker will ask questions and essentially reward like fake money to each attendee. And then at the end of the day, they get to go to a shop with all of these different customized gifts and buy product, or essentially a gift at the end of the day with the money they've gotten from answering questions. And that was a great way to get people engaged. So I think
Engaged. Yeah.
thinking through any sort of gamification is going to add as that activity that I mentioned, like anything that gives you a little bit of extra entertainment. So when the networking and the drinks maybe comes to a lull, they have something else as an option.
Yeah, and most people I think tend to like games, so
Yes, definitely.
so thank you for the awesome session. Great tips, very insightful. Thank you. I have one quick question. Are there any specific objectives or KPIs that we should consider when organizing events for C-level executives?
That's a great question. I think that you shouldn't focus too much on the number of attendees for C-suite level attendees, which is something different from all other events. Normally, you're hoping for a certain number of people to show up. When you're targeting C-suite, even if you only have an intimate dinner with 10 people, that can make such a big difference because each person you're tailoring it to them. And ways that I look at KPIs, I do try to track any business that comes from it. And I know in events that's really hard to do. But at least making sure you have a list of all of the touch points throughout that they've really been engaged with the company can be helpful to make that argument. And then I typically also track, percentages of no-show rates. So being able to show, like, if you do have a lot of attendees
Yeah.
show up, then clearly something resonated with them, whether that was the venue or one of those enhancements that you put in the invitation. And so that that's something you should definitely repeat in the future.
Thank you. So I think that was the last question so far. So any last chances for questions?
And thank you all for joining because I know it is late in
Yeah,
some time zones right now. For
yeah.
me, it's just noon. So I
So
appreciate
you're
all
just
of you
starting the
joining.
day. Well, I don't think we have any more questions, so thank you very much, Rachel. I know
Yeah,
you're
thank
quite
you.
busy right now. Thank you for finding time to sit with us and present all these amazing examples. And also thank you to anyone who joined all of these live sessions and our event for booking meetings and being with us throughout these presentations. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon next time. Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye bye.
Thank you.